All right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can email us, as always, at radio@thefederalist.com. Follow us on Twitter, at FDRLST. You can also hit the like and subscribe button below this video, whichever platform you're watching it on. I'm happy to be joined today by Emily Jashinsky, our culture editor, to talk about culture, and particularly about movies, TV, and the award shows that, frankly, I don't think we're looking forward to, because usually you have the distraction of debating about movies or performances, the like. This year it seems like all we're going to get is politics and wokeness, and there aren't even any movies that anybody's seen.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about this piece that you wrote for us today, Emily, on the bleakness of these award shows and what we can expect.
Well, award shows ratings, everyone knows they were already declining precipitously. I mean, TV ratings in general, but award shows actually have been declining in ratings beyond what you would expect from normal because of streaming and other trends in the industry, that kind of thing. And people are like tuning out award seasons at rates that have been going down year after year, basically, particularly the Oscars. And so what's happening this year is that these ceremonies, which depend on having all celebrities together in close quarters with a high level production in a beautiful, usually a beautiful theater in LA, they can't do that.
Yeah.
Ratings are going down because the ceremonies, first of all, are awarding movies that fewer people have seen. That's not to say that they should be giving Titanic Best Picture every year, but maybe not Parasite. I'm not sure that Parasite was helpful to this cause. And on top of that, this is like all of these trends. It's a perfect storm for awards season because on top of all of those challenges, this year there were no movies released. And all of these delayed releases, things that were pushed to 2021, and all of these like streaming movies that are not big events, right? Like we don't, as a country, flock to the theater to see, something that was released as a streaming title. And so it's created a really big problem, and it's not a hole that I think award shows can actually dig out from, ever.
There's first off, I do think that award shows, to your point, may become kind of this thing of the past, this old type of spectacle that just isn't really received anymore. I mean, keep in mind, back in the day, it was very short in terms of a ceremony. You just had somebody come out and read the announcement and everything like that. It was only the fact that they were TV events that got eyeballs that made them these valuable properties. I think that might be difficult to achieve. And the other thing that is, even though there's a lot of industry that's obviously built on it, I mean, the red carpet stuff and E! And Bravo that pays so much attention to these types of, what are they wearing and that kind of thing. Who are they wearing? That it is the type of thing that you might want to see, that you might see Hollywood try to make happen again. But this year, let's start with this. What was the best movie you saw that came out in 2020?
I thought Invisible Man was a fantastic movie.
Okay.
What about you? What's the best movie?
So I think of the films that I saw in 2020, the actual best one that I saw was Sound of Metal, which I saw fairly recently. It's an Amazon production starring Riz Ahmed, which people might know from The Night Of on HBO or from Rogue One. He's a very interesting young actor, and I just think it's a quality film and not too melodramatic, and I think that it was told a spare story well and was moving. Most of the other films that I saw were either throwaway genre stuff. There was some horror released. If you look at the list of films that are available at your local theater, if your theater is open, you'll see Tenet and Freaky and a handful of other releases. But when I was going down the list of things recommended by the Hollywood Reporter's critics and Variety's critics, I didn't recognize almost any of the names. It was really just like, okay, I've heard of First Cow.
Yeah.
I have, I don't really have any interest in it, but I've heard of it.
But see, this is why it's a perfect storm for Hollywood this year in terms of award seasons. It's like this was already one of their big problems, is that they were taking the Oscars, which is supposed to be, and we can get into an entire conversation about how the decline of mass media is creating these problems, but they were awarding like art house films that people have never heard of. They're putting them in the Best Picture category and then giving them the awards. And so the fact that if you really, the Hollywood Reporter's critics picks for the top 10 movies, not the top 5 movies, not the top 3 movies, the top 10 movies of the year, it's amazing. Like, we follow this stuff professionally.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen it.
I do this for a living.
I didn't see one of them.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of things. I do want to say Another Round, which is a Mads Mikkelsen movie, which is not in English, is worth a watch. It's a group of friends who are bored teachers who decide to follow the instruction of a real philosopher who suggested that everything about human life would be better and more enjoyable if done with a 0.05 alcohol, blood alcohol level. As you might imagine, things get a little out of hand. It's basically
Things get wacky.
It basically is based on that Mitchell and Webb sketch, which, if you've seen it, introduces a secret society known as the Inebriati. But Mads Mikkelsen is good in it, and I mean, Palm Springs was okay.
Yeah, but it was like, I feel like there's so many movies that are exactly like Palm Springs.
Yes, just totally okay.
Yep.
Like, this is an okay film.
Something you stream.
One of the big questions coming out of this is, for me, is, okay, let's say that award show season is dead this year. But the spin is going to be, this is just a one-off.
Yep.
Everything's going to come back. It's going to be the way it was. Everybody's going to love it. There's going to be a ton of successful blockbusters in the coming year, et cetera. I'm more skeptical about that. I'm curious as to your perspective on it. Do you think that the era of the theater, at least for films other than like the big blockbuster, so people, I'm sure, will want to go and see when they eventually release it in theaters, Wonder Woman 1984. You know, that's exactly the kind of film you would go and see in a theater. But for movies other than that, do you think that they're basically dead?
I'm extremely skeptical that it can make a comeback, and that's why I combined, in the piece that I wrote this morning, I combined the conversation about award shows with the conversation about theaters, because these are two trends where, like, there is this conversation that, hey, this is a one-off year, things are weird, there's going to be a pent-up demand, and when things get back to normal, everything will be back to normal, and consumer demand will return as it was previously. We know that that's not the case because of streaming, and essentially what I think has happened is all of these trends have accelerated. So the way that we consume movies has, like, do you remember when Trolls World Tour was released earlier in the pandemic? People loved it. Like, it was great for parents.
Yep.
They paid, $30, sat their kids down, and it's probably cheaper than going to a movie for them. Yeah. And so when we have these incredibly nice televisions that are cheaper than ever to put in our own homes with nice sound systems, the concept of going to a movie is going to have to change.
Essentially, what you've done is you've seen a level of progress on 4K and on 70-inch TVs where a middle-class American family can have essentially a small theater experience in their home. And that renders all of the, like, going to see movies in those small places moot and not desirable, especially when you can just, not spend $10,000 on popcorn. The thing that's interesting to me, and this is where I'll ask your advice as an investor, a savvy investor that I know you to be.
Such a bad idea.
I'm sure that all across the country, there are a ton of theaters that are just belly up and that are, trying to find ways to, either sell their property or, turn into something else. I have always wanted to own a 2-screen theater that was a multi-use facility, so you could have like a comedian in there, or you could have and you could knock out, every other row and put up tables so you can do some kind of bar service type thing, and show, a classic or an indie on one screen and show a new movie on the other. And I just think it would be cool to have that, and to be able to have flexibility with it. Am I an idiot for wanting that. Do you think that I should? And on the flip side, if I'm not an idiot, do you think I should invest in one of these so-called death rooms that formerly were known as cinemas?
I actually think this is your moment. I think in terms of like, one thing that I am still sort of torn about is whether going to the movies is going to be, you know, if you go see the 2021 equivalent of Saving Private Ryan or Titanic, that those are the films that we're still going to need these like IMAX capable theaters, because my inclination as, you know, an urban millennial is that if I was going to,
you didn't have enough vocal fry when you said that.
Urban millennial. So if I wanted to spend $15 to go to the movies, I would want to do it in sort of a chic setting where there's good food and good wine.
Yes.
And it's cozy and there's a kind of escapist element to it, not just sitting in what we know as theaters to watch a movie that I could stream.
Yes. And that to me is the kind of experience that I would want to create, because I think that still has some desirability for people in their 20s and 30s. You still want that date night that takes you out of the home, but you do want it to be higher quality. You have a higher quality expectation, and I think that's great. We'll see, you know, how things adapt to that. But one of the other elements I wanted to bring up to you is just, you mentioned how this is accelerating, and I think that is particularly true when you look back at last year and a film like The Irishman.
Yes,
which actually they had like one of their New York premiere showings was in a theater that was right near me. And they, you know, it's same sort of thing, cozy, intimate kind of thing. And I mean, whatever you thought of The Irishman, I didn't particularly like it. I thought it was overlong, overstuffed. So many directors, when they get to a certain stage, it's like they can do whatever they want. And that can sometimes be a problem. You know, it's like the same equivalent of like Stephen King when he writes a book and it's like twice as long as it should be. But that was a production that was clearly meant to be, this is going to be both our theater and our streaming thing for Netflix. And the decision to make it that way was clearly part of this whole, we're going to shift to this. Do you think that in the coming year, you're going to see an increased acceptance on the part of some of these directors who are still kind of able to make their own unique vision? Because you had the initial response from Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve about the Warner Brothers decision regarding, we're going to just, you know, put Dune on streaming and that kind of thing, as opposed to wait for theaters. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Hollywood, there are people in Hollywood, Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, who are so upset about the shift to streaming because they make their movies specifically for movie theaters and they want people to see them in the theater experience. It's interesting, in the piece that I wrote for this morning, I went back and looked at a Deadline interview with a Hollywood historian who talked about, actually, the Hollywood that we know right now was created in part because of the Spanish flu in 1918 and 1919. And what that did was force people to rethink the way, because of the economic conditions, it caused all of these little mom and pop theaters, which there were a lot at the time, to close down. And it created more conglomerates and fewer people owning more stuff. And that totally changed the concept of movies, essentially. And I actually think something similar is going to happen right now. It was already happening. We know that it was already happening. But to some extent, this is going to be unavoidable for people who, so sort of like the Hollywood old guard, who they'll probably still stand firm. But if they want to continue to make money, they're going to have to compromise.
So I'm interested to see how that whole thing plays out, because it's kind of going to be a test of how much power these powerful directors actually wield, you know, people with their own unique visions. One thing that is happening to theaters right now is, and this depends on where you live, obviously, you can actually rent theaters privately for showings. I was checking in Virginia, and you can actually do up to 20 people. It costs you $100 for an older release, or for the AMCs around me, it's $250 for a new release. So you can rent an entire theater to watch Tenet with 19 friends for $250, or you can watch Die Hard for $100. I would recommend the latter personally. But you know, that to me is just, it smacks of such desperation that it shows you how much money they're just losing, that they would take $100 just to get you in so that you buy that overpriced popcorn.
Right, and that's the question. And by the way, I put in a request with AMC if we could show whatever movie we wanted as the Federalist, and they never got back to me. So maybe they're not that desperate.
Well, just follow up, because I don't know. If you could, here's I've never seen
Night showing.
Team America: World Police, obviously, a movie a film that deserves appreciation on the big screen. Actually, the movie that I would want to see is Last of the Mohicans, because I've never seen it on the big screen, and I think it's amazing.
That's right.
So it's the perfect guy and girl movie because it has lots of killing and romance. So anyway, I want to read to you what was my top 10 list in 2019 of films.
This is so sad.
I'll start from the bottom. A Marriage Story, so streaming.
Yep.
Richard Jewell, which I just think was whatever you think of it as a movie, was just very well acted and an interesting story. Parasite, Joker, Apollo 11, which is documentary, Ford versus Ferrari, 1917, Uncut Gems, The Irishman, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
And the movies on that list that aren't streaming, this is something that's really interesting. The movies on that list that didn't come out on streamers are ones that you really want the theatrical experience for, with perhaps the exception of Richard Jewell. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's a movie you want to see. It's beautiful in the theater. And it would be a very different experience if you're just streaming it on your TV.
And of those, I'm thinking...
1917? That's a movie made for the big screen, specifically.
Of these, I think the ones that I saw on television, not in a theater, it was Marriage Story, obviously, Apollo 11, and Irishman. Yeah, because I watched that at home. But so of those, the vast majority I saw in theaters. 1917, you cannot, it's a completely different experience. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, first off, I think it's an excellent film, and I've rewatched it a ton of times, and I really enjoyed it. But also, it's one of those movies where if you don't see it on a big screen, you'll miss so many things, just little details about the things that they did along the way, and it's they add to just how much labor went into creating this vision. And so, even if you were watching it on a 70-inch TV, you would miss out on that, and I think that it makes a big difference. Compare that to what we're dealing with this year, and best picture winner beanpole, whatever. I mean, come on. I mean, if I would seriously consider, if I was the Golden Globes, and just would literally troll everyone. Just make Trolls World Tour nominated for every category. Every single category. Trolls World Tour has a shot. Can it run the table? Can it shoot the moon?
That's an incredible troll move.
Yes.
Because it's that was one of the most successful movies of the year. The most memorable film events of the year was literally Trolls World Tour.
So I do want to shift to talking about television, because television, unlike the movies, obviously had a much better year. But before we get away from the movies, I do wonder what you think we can expect in terms of productions in the next year. Because obviously there were a ton of things that had to shut down in terms of while they were making the movie. We got a trailer for the Robert Pattinson Batman that, where it's apparently they only have a third of the movie. They've still got to make it, but they wanted to keep interest. And then we have these little trailers and things that look clearly they had this at a certain point, and then things had to shut down. You talk about in your piece this Screaming by Tom Cruise at the group of people who are working on Mission Impossible 7
in Rome,
and obviously Mission Impossible Fallout is the best action movie I've seen in 10 years. It is, I think, just as action films go, it's better than any of the James Bonds that they put out in the last 10 years. Did you not like it as much?
Do you think that I saw that movie back?
Oh my gosh.
I avoid action movies
Are you kidding me? I would think that just Henry Cavill's reloading his arms sort of instance would have brought you into that. It's also hilarious. So you should didn't you watch the Fast and Furious movies?
I have seen select Fast and Furious movies.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. I was just gonna say, like, if you've seen that, come on, you got to watch Mission Impossible.
Well, this is an entire different conversation, but I watched Die Hard for the first time recently.
I did hear about that.
Yes.
Yes. What did you think of it?
I loved it, and I thought I was going to hate it.
Okay.
The way I describe it is this is exactly what a movie is supposed to be, and it's like that's how I describe Knives Out. There are certain movies where it's like this is exactly what a movie is supposed to be. You don't have to think too hard, but it's entertaining from start to finish.
Alan Rickman in that movie is just so amazing.
It's like he was Snape before he was Snape.
he recognizes the guy's suit, and they say Arafat gets this made there as well. Just circling back, obviously Tom Cruise is at the center of trying to get the industry started again. He's yelling at people who broke protocol and threatened to have or risk having the movie shut down, screaming at them about insurance and the like. And regardless of the fact that he is, he is a Scientologist and is dicey, and obviously everything related to that, though obviously that's also true of Elizabeth Moss. Everything he said, like I heard it in the background, I was like, oh man, who's screaming? This sounds like really ranty and Christian Bale like. And then I actually heard what he was saying. I was like, actually, this seems completely reasonable to me.
He's totally right. He's totally right. And when people think about Hollywood, they think about sort of a phrase that I use all the time, which is Hollywood elites. But there are a lot of people under the Hollywood elites that rely on the elites, like Tom Cruise. And this is what he's saying. He says, "Do you know what I sleep with that night? I sleep with their jobs, their college funds, all of that. Because if this movie gets shut down, this industry is wrecked," because he sees the production of Mission Impossible in Rome as kind of a case study, an instructive case study that the industry is looking towards to see, is it possible? Can it be done? And so with the vaccine, I'm sure that people in Hollywood, and I'm actually curious about this when it comes to the Oscars, like, is everyone in Hollywood going to be vaccinated by the time the Oscars happen?
So I was going to say, they distribute the vaccines to the states. The states determine who is essential. I mean, Gavin already did this with the production side. You saw that lady talking about her bar. Who's to say he's not going to do, hey, if you are on this ranking in the IMDb priority list, that makes you essential.
But to Tom Cruise's point,
it's like one of the Deschanels.
Right. We'll pick it. It's like the Sophie's Choice. But no, there is truth to what Tom Cruise is saying, is that the stars make money for a lot of people down the chain.
Yes,
absolutely true. So I think productions are going to start to get back to normal, because I do expect that some of these people will be at the front of the lines, and it does, it is an economy and it does make a lot of money. So I think all of these halted productions, what's going to be weird, and I've talked to some sources about this, what's going to be weird is all of the stuff that was tabled, there's now this weird backlog, and then there's also now this weird thing that's like, well, how do we make this? Is this a streamer? Is this a theater movie? And so you have this backlog, and you have this changing concept of what a movie is and what it should be. And the industry was just wrecked financially. So they're going to be looking to China for more money, which sucks and is a big problem. Hollywood is a mess right now, basically.
Let's talk about TV. Tell me about what some of the best TV was this year.
Okay, so Ben sent me an article before this it was like AV Club's top 10 TV shows.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And the number 10 was The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Yes.
Which I appreciate very much. And I do think, it was one of the best TV shows that I watched this year, despite the fact that we're only 4 or 5 weeks in. It's up there. I actually...
What makes it great?
So Salt Lake City Housewives is great because they are all insufferable, and it's also an important moment in, I think, the reality TV era, because Bravo is now, and Bravo is really there's TLC shows, which are very different from Bravo shows. Bravo and E kind of have the same stuff, and all of these are different than the network competition reality shows. So there's a lot of different reality TV now. But Bravo, increasingly, since they've been doing this for over 10 years now, they have to sort of respond to the viewers, and the way they're doing that is by breaking the fourth wall. And so this new generation of housewives that Salt Lake City really epitomizes is hyper self-aware. They're very, very aware of how this is going to build their brands. They have tequila brands.
So is it kind of like there's a meta element to it that didn't previously exist?
Yes, it's super meta, and this was creeping into some of the other shows. It crept into Vanderpump Rules, and basically, I think it destroyed Vanderpump Rules because they weren't, that's not what we wanted to see. We didn't want to see meta Vanderpump Rules. We just wanted to see them in their natural habitat at SUR. But with Salt Lake City, they are hyper aware, and it's this new sort of look into how influencer culture has changed women in this class level. And it's actually very, very interesting. They're sort of like #girl bosses, which is partially what makes them insufferable. But that's very important to their identities. And it's sort of like, it is meta, but it's also like, this is what Bravo has created.
What is another piece of TV, dramatic or reality otherwise?
Yeah, there was a documentary boom this year,
Yeah.
and HBO has always been at the center of that. And one of the best things that I have seen this year, by far and away, was Murder on Middle Beach. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on HBO. It's a kid who makes a documentary about the murder of his mother. And he went to film school. He's a documentarian, and it's something I'm not going to spoil anything, but like all of his family members are implicated basically. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of television. It's also super interesting because the way documentaries are happening now, and Netflix is super reliant on documentaries, HBO is super reliant on documentaries. These are things that are like a really big deal. They do them in like these almost movie-sized pieces. So it was a 4-part series. Every episode was a little bit over an hour or around an hour long. And again, this speaks to how our concept of movies and TV are totally changing, and the line is blurring.
So can I ask you a question about the documentary style thing there? Because I think that this year had one of the greatest documentaries I've ever seen in my life made in The Last Dance. Now, granted, it's a biased perspective. It is Michael Jordan's perspective. It is, but at the same time, they did some things with it, not just with the original footage, not just with kind of these old, never aired, background things, but with the ability to hand someone an iPad, play for them an interview on it that they have not seen before, and get the immediate reaction.
Yeah.
Okay. Something that they did throughout the series, which I just think is going to be completely adopted by everybody going forward for stuff like this, because it was amazing. Like, I mean, a lot of the like memes and reaction GIFs and stuff you've gotten from that is from that type of experience where they're immediately reacting to something that someone else has said that they haven't heard yet. I just thought it was amazing. At the same time, I was very frustrated by some of the documentaries that I saw this year that I felt were unnecessarily just padded for time in a very like court TV kind of way. Like one would be McMillions.
Yeah, McMillions definitely was padded.
Which I felt very padded. And then the other would be Wilderness of Error, which is which is a murder mystery one. And it's just like, how many times are you going to show me the same thing? Like I'm streaming this or I'm binging it. I just saw that a few minutes ago. You don't need to remind me again with this. And I took some simple stories and made them into documentaries that were overlong, where at The Last Dance, I felt like everything I was seeing was new or was a new twist on something. And, part of it is just that they got to interview virtually everybody that you would ever want to interview for something like this, including Carmen Electra. But the
star of Scary Movie 3.
Yes. But the thing that I took away from it was, this is just incredibly dramatic. Even if you didn't care about basketball, you could be moved by what was going on screen.
No, and that's a great example. I mean, the biggest show this year was freaking Tiger King. And Tiger King was really well made. But in terms of like the padding, this is a serious problem. I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is also HBO, is about Patton Oswalt's wife, her death, and her work in the Golden State Killer, is another one of those things that was just like, if it had been a little bit shorter, it would have been perfect. It would have been brilliant, but it was padded. This is so interesting, though, and I'm going to write about this. I don't think I've mentioned this to you yet. I was obsessed with Grey Gardens this summer. I just got sucked into the world of Grey Gardens. I watched everything I possibly could about it. I read everything I possibly could about it. And so there has always been this element to documentaries of what we now think of as reality television. But if you look at exactly what you just mentioned about Last Dance, when you're handing Michael Jordan an iPad and showing him an interview he's never seen before, it's reality television.
Yeah.
That's our concept of reality TV. And it's the same thing with Murder on Middle Beach. This is a man who is like experiencing the investigation as it proceeds. And so that's a different thing between like Tiger King.
Yeah.
And that is a trend that is making like a huge splash in the documentary world. And it's really because anybody can pick up a camera now and film themselves. The Housewives were doing this. They were filming themselves for half the season sometimes. It's really, really interesting. And it's part of this thing that we're like, everything is shifting.
Yeah.
Our concept of television movies is totally shifting.
So I want to run through a couple of different shows, and I don't know if you've seen any of these, but just ones that I found interesting this year. One that I want to single out that we don't really have to talk about, but just that I think it's so weird to have a show that was as dominant in terms of its ratings and attention from viewers versus almost zero critical attention, and that's Yellowstone.
Yeah,
which is consistently, basically was winning these ratings wars over and over again. It was clearly a show that was very popular. It was very popular with both men and women, which is pretty rare for something like this. But it's basically, I mean, it's a more dramatic, more violent, sexier Western soap opera, basically. Yeah. But you've got Costner in it, and you've got, high quality acting and beautiful spaces and stuff. It just is so weird to me that this isn't on the cover of magazines. Is it just that they view it as like, this is dad TV?
I think it's because it's on Paramount partially.
Yeah.
Don't you think it has to have something to do with that?
Because it's true that because Waco which was also on Paramount, didn't get much attention either.
Right, until it was on Netflix.
Yes.
And then it took off.
Yeah.
And so I think that's partially it, but that's going to change. And I've noticed with Yellowstone as this year, and we wrote about this a lot last year as it was happening, but this year when all of the streamers, like we had some of these streamers that we have now, HBO Max, they're new.
Yeah.
And that just happened over the past year. Some of these things, like it's forcing people to pay attention to Yellowstone. And I think over the next couple of years, we're going to hear more, like a show like Yellowstone is not going to get on the back burner anymore.
Saw a similar dynamic happen with Cobra Kai because it wasn't available. And
it was
then
on YouTube, right?
Yes. And nobody had bought it. And then it goes to Netflix and suddenly everybody starts watching it and paying attention to it. I still have not finished the second season, so I'll leave that out. Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul.
Season 5 ends with a real cliffhanger, and you have this phenomenal villain in Lalo. And this was just one where Kim as a character really grew this season. It was interesting for lots of reasons, and I mean, there are people who make the argument that it's a better show than Breaking Bad. I'm not sure it's a better show. It's a different show, but if you wrote it out on paper, I'm not sure you would be able to understand why it's such a success. But it really is an impressive success in terms of its run.
I don't understand it at all.
You don't?
I don't understand why it's so successful. It's not because it's not. I don't understand it not because it's good. Obviously, it's good. It's prestige television. It's beautifully made. It's well done. It's just like it's so rare that somebody's able to create. It's like freaking Laverne and Shirley. You're taking Happy Days and creating Laverne and Shirley. It's so rare that you're actually able to do that.
And I just don't even know what Odenkirk would say if you went back in time and told him, like, let me tell you about your future. Yes. Mandalorian season 2, not yet over yet as we record this, but obviously lived up to all of the hype and expectations for it from its fans this season. And it got way more like in-depth and Easter egg filled in terms of everything that it's doing. And obviously its success has bred response from Disney, which seems to be out of the business, at least temporarily, of making, they're definitely not going to make trilogies. They will make some movies, but they're not going to do trilogies. They're going to do TV shows primarily for the coming couple of years on this front. And that is interesting for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
What We Do in the Shadows, season 2.
Oh my gosh. So
I know you
good.
love this. Yes.
It's the one thing that I think really captures the beauty of sitcoms. There's just nothing else that's doing what it's doing. It has the best writing in comedy television. Don't you think?
I Actually, no. It probably does have the best writing in comedy television, given that Always Sunny is mostly improv.
Yes.
So yes, because I think Always Sunny is funnier, but
can't beat Always Sunny.
But you're correct. Like, it's a scripted sort of sitcom pastiche, and what I love is just like everyone is funny in a slightly different way, as opposed to sort of overlap in terms of the characters, which you see in a lot of these shows. Fargo, I don't know if you saw season 4.
I haven't seen it.
So it is a disappointment, I'm sad to say. I think that Fargo season 1 and 2 were incredible. Season 3 disappointed me a little. This one, I think, is a true disappointment because in part of the high quality cast that they have. Their acting is top notch, but it's the story itself that is kind of blunted and suffers. Jessie Buckley is actually really good in it, who's also in the I'm thinking of Ending It All or whatever, the Charlie Kaufman movie. And she's really good, but like Chris Rock is kind of a disappointment. Like, he's miscast. He's not really that guy. And I don't know. This is a situation where Noah Hawley, because of his success with this this whole process, particularly season 1, has been given free reign to do basically whatever he wanted with things. And I think that didn't really serve him this time around. A little too much creative freedom. Narcos Mexico season 2. I'm assuming that we're not into that.
I was watching Reno 911 on Quibi while you were.
Oh yes.
Actually,
but tell me about that,
really,
I didn't
really
see
good.
it.
So everything on Quibi was garbage except for the Reno 911 reboot, which was like, it was as though it had never ended. It picked up, everything felt exactly like it did before, and the writing was just as good, the acting was just as good. I mean, that's another show that's mostly improv. Yeah. Fantastic.
Narcos Mexico is way better than the original Narcos.
Really?
I will make that argument as long as the live-long day, and and season 2 was very good, and you start to see the growth of El Chapo as a character on it, and is excellent. Have you seen the Queen's Gambit yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've heard that it's like super bingeable though. Like when you start it, you just inhale it.
And I have to say they do a really good job of making what is a very boring sport to watch in playing chess very visually interesting. Anya Taylor-Joy is a great rising young actress. She was also in one of the worst movies this year, The New Mutants, which is basically unwatchable. But you may know her from she was in Split and in The Witch. Okay. She's got these very, very striking kind of features, and I think that she's a rising star. Great in it. Mrs. America.
Yeah.
You did watch that.
Oh, absolutely.
What did you think?
A beautiful show that is entirely fictional.
Well, I will tell you, Queen's Gambit also entirely fictional. There was not a young rising female chess star who took the world by storm.
Women can't play chess.
You heard it here first.
But they can stop the ERA. No, Mrs. America was gorgeous. The acting, I am like actually really sick of what's her name? It'll come to me. But it's a beautiful show.
Rose Byrne?
No, not Rose Byrne. She's in all the Ryan Murphy.
Sarah Paulson?
Yeah, Sarah Paulson.
Yeah.
She's playing the same character in every single thing.
She does.
It
really irritates me. It really irritates me. He should stop it.
Stop. Yeah, just stop. And it's like, it's worse on American Horror Story because like it's like so obvious that it's the same character recycled over and over again. But when she goes into a role like Mrs. America and it's a period role, it's like, holy, you're playing the same person. Yeah. She's a one-note actress. Not that she's not capable of more, but Mrs. America is just such a wasted opportunity to it starts off with understanding Phyllis Schlafly's complexities, and she's an amazing person who's underappreciated in our pop culture and in our history. But it starts off that way and then just veers into like delusional leftism, where Phyllis Schlafly is a Cold War, like she has cans in her basement, she's a prepper, and it gets really weird.
Yeah, and there were a lot of inaccuracies there too. But I do think, again, this is one of those situations.
Bircher.
I do think this is one of those situations where the Hollywood left is fascinated by the right. They frequently end up writing them better or as more convincing characters than they do the leftists. And
Yeah.
and that's something that runs throughout a lot of what they create, and it makes people who are supposed to be viewed as either the villains or the outcasts or something like that as actually seeming kind of heroic to people on the right, or as something to aspire to.
Yes.
Did you see Space Force?
I didn't see Space Force. I started it, but I
Okay,
didn't finish it.
it is worth watching. It's not great, but it's like it's entertaining. And Carell, I mean, I just love Carell, and so it's if you like him, then and Malkovich is just like great in it. Anyway, animated stuff. I know you don't watch animated stuff. Archer came back for season 11. I had kind of given up on Archer. They did this run of like 4 series in a row where he was in story he was in a coma, but in the series he was basically in various like different time jumps. Like there was one where he's in Hollywood in the 40s. There's one where he's on like a desert island. There's one where he's in space.
Wow.
Sort of thing.
I like it.
And I think that they had just kind of written themselves into a corner, but then I came back this season and they restored him to his old spy agency ways. And I actually found it to be, kind of similar to the Reno 911 thing. It was like, oh, good. Like this thing is back now. And it has a lot of the same elements and humor to it. Jamie Lee Curtis is in it and as kind of entertaining, funny. And I love Jessica Walter. And so she's kind of, like, once again, the best part of the show. Other animated stuff, Rick and Morty season 4 part 2. The season 4 was the first season after Dan Harmon's massive contract deal.
Yes.
And it's the most uneven season they've had yet. So that's not great. It had like one of like the best episodes that maybe they've ever made, but it also had like 2 of the worst. So
better than Pickle Rick.
Yes, better than Pickle Rick. And the funny thing about it is that there's no audio in it. Or no audio in this one segment of it, where
it's a silent film.
Well, it is. It is like a tragic silent film, and everyone who's seen it will know exactly what I'm talking about. And the funny thing about it is, basically the animating team had to add it because the episode he had written was too short.
Oh, interesting.
So like the best thing that came out of it was something Dan Harmon didn't write, which is just like hilarious to me. BoJack Horseman had its final season. Not a great ending.
That's what I heard.
And it also sounded kind of internally like it was abbreviated because the show's really expensive, and like they didn't. What's his name? Waksberg, Raphael. I can never remember his name. Basically, he wasn't quite ready to end the show. I will say that if you go back, it had some excellent episodes as a series, and you shouldn't hold that final season against it. But it just got phenomenally sad, and as an animated show, you need a little bit more humor than just like, this is a show about depression, alcoholism, suicide, and how you can never make things better. And
but the colors are bright.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, Solar Opposites, which is on Hulu. Okay. It has the other half of the Rick and Morty creative team, and the guy who does the voices, and is written by some other people. And it was a total surprise to me how much I enjoyed it. It was very funny, and they do a standalone episode that is kind of an offshoot that kind of deals with a couple of side characters, which is excellent. Like, it's so good. And I love the ability with these animated shows to sort of say, we're going to take the opportunity that we have to do something completely different than what we normally do the rest of the year, the rest of the season of this show. And we're going to use that as a story that, which is something they've done in Rick and Morty, and that some of these other animated shows have done, that you could never see on like a normal produced show where, wait a minute, we have our main characters, we stick with our main characters, there has to be progress, etc. Right. No, you can just ignore them for a minute and kind of do a story that's just all about the people in the background.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Anyway, so as you can see, I have a lot of things to say about TV, but nothing. So Emmys are going to be good this year. That's what I'm saying. Emmys will be good.
Yeah, and they will not all go to Trolls World Tour.
Yes,
the Oscars.
yes. Unfortunately, Rob.
No, I'm always nervous to do these shows with Ben because I'm the culture editor, and Ben consumes so much culture.
I'm way behind though. I haven't seen Good Lord Bird. I haven't seen Undoing. I have not finished The Crown. I haven't seen.
I'm surprised you haven't seen Undoing. I figured you'd be all over that one.
It's on. I want to do Good Lord Bird first because I just think Ethan Hawke as John Brown is such a weird thing. But yes, I will watch Undoing. Is there anything else? Is there something that I left off that you think I should definitely watch next?
Have you watched Love Is Blind? We didn't mention it, but that was a
You know
phenomenon.
what? I totally forgot about Love Is Blind. Yes, I watched Love Is Blind.
That took
I
off.
blocked some of that from my memory. Oh my gosh, that show. I watched that show this year.
Yeah.
Lord.
That took off right as quarantine was starting. And
no,
then
I watched it. I watched it.
It was interesting.
What are they going to do next? Are they going to do another season? They have to.
They're absolutely doing another season. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's a crazy concept.
Yeah. No, I don't. With all these reality shows, I just never know. We didn't mention Floor is Lava.
We didn't mention Floor is Lava. Also, How To with John Wilson. Have you seen that
I've
yet?
not yet.
Excellent.
You keep telling me it's good.
You'd like it.
Okay.
Yes. As someone who's lived in New York, you would like it.
I'm mostly, what I would say is generally I'm behind on the HBO stuff.
Yeah,
Because
that's fair.
you choose which streaming things you do kind of at once, and I with HBO I kind of jump in for a chunk and watch everything, and then I unsubscribe, and then I'll go back.
Oh, that's right. You do that.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Two
yeah.
movies also we didn't mention, or comedies. We didn't mention King of Staten Island, which I thought was it had promise, but it was a good movie.
Yeah,
and
decent.
American Pickle with Seth Rogen. It's on HBO as well. It's just a fantastic comedy movie, and those are so rare today. And these were both sort of breaths of fresh air. But King of Staten Island, I think, needed to pick up a little bit.
Yeah, it disappointed me. I thought it had promise, and Burr was good in it, and isn't it weird how kind of the developments in 2020 are that like Bill Burr is an actor now?
Yeah, it's Bill Burr is the story of 2020.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah. But he really is.
Yeah, he really kind of
really
is. Now that you say it. Ugh. Well. Thank you so much for listening to us barrel through a bunch of the culture that came out here in 2020. I'm Ben Domenech. This is Emily Jashinsky. I hope you will follow us on Twitter at FDRLST. Email us at radio@thefederalist.com. You've been listening to another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. We'll be back soon with more. Until then, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.